Welcome to this episode of Moments in Leadership. A real quick personal thanks to all the new Supercast supporters out there. Without you and frankly all of the supporters helping out, this would be way tougher than it is. You are proven advocates for the project, and for that I have deep admiration for all of you. I've got John Corbin at the Hot Wash level, Matt Smith at the Buy Me a Beer level, and Colonel Robert Bodish at the Hot Wash level, who's the professor of naval science out at UC Boulder's ROTC program. So thanks a lot for supporting the project. And if you're not checking out their Instagram sites and all the good stuff they're doing at that Navy ROTC unit, be sure to give it a check out. And if you are an aspiring NROTC midshipman, make sure you're checking that program out as well. And then finally, a donor at the $50 level, Jason Freeby. Thanks a lot, brother. Appreciate it. It's good to see an artilleryman supporting the project. I'm glad we have connected. If you're enjoying the project and want to support it, there's a link in the show notes to my Supercast site that allows you to make either a one-time donation or a reoccurring donation. And these donations help me outsource all the technical work that I struggle with, like sound engineering. I don't come close to even covering my costs, but to the extent that I do, I will donate all the profits after expenses to military charities, which I'm doing already anyway, but you get my point. What I'm trying to say is this isn't a business for me. For profit is a project, and all of those donations help support it and keep it free for everybody. So I just want to say thank you because you're donating money to the project, and that means a lot. Also, this summer, I'm going to consider approaching some companies that cater to the military audience and see if they're interested in underwriting the project to make it even better. So if anyone has any contacts, please drop me a note over email at themilloffice@gmail.com. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes as well. But think companies like military gear companies, watch companies, the bigger merch vendors, optics companies. You all know what I'm talking about. The people who sell products to the military folks that may want some marketing exposure to my audience. My next episode is with newly retired Master Guns Scott Stalker. I'll be launching that in June. It's a really good episode. I'm scheduled to record with Brigadier General Val Jackson at the end of May, so it's likely that will drop after Master Guns Stalkers, since I seem to have gotten into a groove of alternating between the officer and enlisted. I've got commitments from 2 female Marine Corps Sergeants Major, and I'm working with Fleet Master Chief David Isom, who's the Command Senior Enlisted Leader for U.S. Indo-PACOM. And as you can imagine, the time zone difference and his job make it really tough to connect. So that's just going to happen when it happens. But I'm excited because he's a career Navy SEAL with time at JSOC, Development Group, and the regular SEAL teams. Okay, with that, this episode is with retired Major General Jim Lukeman, who's currently the president and CEO of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. Major General Lukeman retired in July of 2020 after 40 years of continuous service. He was born in Beaufort, South Carolina, and then graduated from the University of Notre Dame with a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering, and then was commissioned through the NROTC program in 1980. Major General Lukeman's assignments in the operating forces included Rifle and Weapons Platoon Commander in Alpha Company and 81mm Mortar Platoon Commander in 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, and then Assistant Operations Officer and Company Commander of Lima Company, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines, then Executive Officer of 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and Operations Officer of 1st Marine Division. He commanded 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, and he served as the Assistant Chief of Staff, G7 and G3 for the 1st Marine Division in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. And when we get into his career, you're going to quickly learn that he was in a battalion with some other very storied and well-known Marine officers, so pay attention to that part. Major General Lukeman's other assignments include Director of the Career Course at the Staff NCO Academy in Quantico, Virginia, the Operations Officer, Alpha Company Marine Security Guard Battalion in Frankfurt, Germany, Marine Officer Instructor at the NROTC Unit of the University of Texas in Austin, Assistant for Strategy and Force Planning in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Commanding Officer Security Battalion and Chief of Staff for Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia, Chief of Staff for Training and Education Command, and Military Assistant to the Assistant Commandant. Kind of cool. As a general officer, he served as Deputy Director for Strategy and Plans J5 in U.S. Africa Command, then was the Commanding General of 2nd Marine Division, was the Commanding General of Training and Education Command, or TCOM, the Assistant Chief of Staff, UCJ5, United Nations Command Combined Forces Command, U.S. Forces Korea, and Commanding General, U.S. Marine Corps Forces Korea. And finally, he was the Inspector General of the entire United States Marine Corps. Major General Lukeman is a graduate of the Marine Corps Amphibious Warfare School, Marine Corps Command and Staff College, and National War College. He's married to the very wonderful, gracious, and funny Frances Lukeman, who I've come to know really well through my time on the board of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. And as an aside, aside, she has rescued me when I've been stuck in the queue and made sure that I was not lost in awkward social moments that tend to materialize in big military events with a lot of senior leaders. And with that, welcome to Moments in Leadership, retired Marine Major General Jim Lukeman, also CEO of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dave. It's great to be here.
So I want to start off the episode by talking about how you and I know each other, because we both work together on the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. And for the uninitiated, that's synonymous with the Marine Corps Museum. You work in the museum every single day, and you are the CEO of the Heritage Foundation. Let's start off the episode by just giving a quick update. Like, what's going on at the museum? There's some exciting stuff. And let's talk about the 250th, all of that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world. After spending my life in the Marine Corps and then retiring, I now find myself working in the National Museum of the Marine Corps every day, which is awesome. So, and leading the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation, which built this magnificent museum down here just outside of Quantico. So it is pretty exciting. There's always something new here at the museum, but this year specifically, there's a couple of key events coming up here soon. So the one everybody's waiting for is there's two new galleries that'll be open later this year here in the museum, and this is going to cover the last 40 years of Marine Corps history. So this is Iraq and Afghanistan, and then the 20 years before that from Vietnam up until 2001. So Desert Storm and operations around the world in the 80s and 90s.
That's great. So when does it actually start then? Early 80s?
Starts right after Vietnam. So like 76. The first thing when you walk in, you'll see is the Cold War, where it's talking about we're in the midst of the Cold War. The Marine Corps galleries, really, the first thing you're hit with is the barracks in Beirut that was blown up in 1983.
Sure.
So that's one of the first exhibits when you come into that gallery.
Right. So it's our generation.
It's our time in the Corps.
Exactly. It's pre-name tapes on the camis and to today, pretty much. So
that's right. And
actually, probably some green satins.
Well, but when I came in OCS, we had sateen covers, but camouflage utilities.
Oh, really?
So that was 79.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any satins in the exhibit. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay. So that's exciting. I know I've seen some behind the scenes. It's so impressive. I'm telling you, if you're a listener and you've been waiting for these exhibits to open up, I've seen some of the behind the scenes, and they're incredible. Yes, artilleryman, there's an M198 in there, but there's the tank, there's the LAV, there's an Amtrak, there's the F-18 hanging from the ceiling. There's the city block from Fallujah. I mean, it's just incredible. But where is it right now? What are they actually finishing up right now?
Right. So what they're finishing up right now is the media portions of it. So all of the artifacts are in the cases, and the big things are all there. The team was just out in LA filming, because a lot of what brings the museum to life are the oral histories, the media that goes along with it. In this case, there'll be some media that in the Fallujah part where you'll be able to see Marines, clearing a building. So they're out in LA filming. And then when they come back with that, they'll install all the audio, visual, and then the electronic brain that makes it all work. So the sights and sounds and smells that are coordinated in the gallery all work under a computerized system that makes it all happen in the right time and the right place. So that's all got to get installed. We expect that to be done late summer, certainly before the birthday this year. So sometime between, August and November, those things will be done and open to the public. So we're really excited about that.
Great. I'm excited about it too. And you were talking about the scent. There's actually a scent machine in there in the Fallujah block, right?
Yeah. Yes, there is.
Okay.
That's right.
Terrific. So, everybody's going to love that.
It's the whole idea behind immersing visitors in the scene. So it's not just looking at stuff. It's actually feeling like you're a part of it and being experienced. And that's why it has to be so legit for Marines, because when you come through, if it's not right, Marines will let you know right away that it's not right. So.
Right. So what else is going on at the museum these days?
Yeah. So the other big project we're doing right now is finishing up an expansion of the park outside. So Semper Fidelis Memorial Park outside the museum, we're about almost doubling it in length right now. That project will be done here probably around the 1st of April. And we got a medium girder bridge out there. So as your listeners know, the Marine Corps no longer has bridge companies. So we've divested ourselves of that. But when that happened, somebody had a great idea that we could get one here for the museum and keep it. So LogCom sent one up, and we've installed it in the park, and it's a usable bridge. So we had a bunch of Marines and retired Marines who knew how to put a bridge together. Come out and put this thing together last October, and it's sitting out there in the park right now. It's awesome.
That's really cool, because I think I tend to forget this when I walk into the museum. I park my car and I just start walking, and it's just like a magnet. I just want to walk through the front doors. But there's a whole park outside of the museum, and that's what you're talking about, which is the where the bricks are, and there's some memorials and things like that. And there's also the chapel out there, which people use for all kinds of different purposes, right?
Right. Yeah. So the museum and Semper Fidelis Park together, it's really a living, breathing thing. So just yesterday we had it was the first of the month, so we had a lot of promotion ceremonies in the museum.
Mm-hmm.
We also had a warrant officer basic class getting commissioned. So they were all here commissioning inside and outside the museum yesterday. So what you see in the museum is this whole life cycle. People get commissioned, they get promoted, they retire, they have reunions, we have funerals,
Right.
we have weddings in the chapel. It all happens. So this museum really is a place, it's a living, breathing place for Marines to have their experiences throughout their career.
Yeah, that's great. I also think one of the really cool things about the museum too is that for people who want to forever cement their legacy, there are donation levels where you can have your name etched into the marble on the inside of the museum. And I just think that's such a fantastic thing. I walk in there, I see these people's names. I think they're going to be there forever.
The museum was built with private donations.
Mm-hmm.
General Christmas and General Blackman and General Kessler and now me. But those guys in the early years raised a tremendous amount of money from Marines, mostly and friends of Marines, to build this beautiful museum. And so we recognize those donations here in a lot of ways. Simplest way is the bricks. As you've seen, there's over 40,000 of them now.
And growing.
And growing.
People can still buy them, correct?
Sure. Bricks, you just go online and buy them or come here to the office, give us a call, and you can buy a brick. And I've got 3 of them out there. They're easy, simple ways to recognize somebody or some event out in the park. But then there's other levels. You can sponsor a seat in the theater. You can purchase a bench, a tree, or just sponsor an exhibit in the museum. So artifacts and exhibits have sponsorship that go along with them if you're interested in doing that, or just contribute to the foundation generally. But as you said, after you reach certain levels, you're recognized here in the museum forever. So the names at the highest levels are etched in the marble wall in the museum, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. So how about the 250th? Let's talk about that, because I'm super excited about that. Look, if the Marine Corps knows how to party for the 247th, like just imagine the 250th. It's going to be a year-long event, don't you think?
It is. It's and the Marine Corps, we just met with them the other day. They're planning a lot in 2025 because, one, we want to make every Marine, really every American, proud of what the Marine Corps stands for 250 years. This is what we stand for: honor, courage, commitment, selfless sacrifice, and service, patriotism. These are American values. They're Marine Corps values. And so that's what we're going to do throughout the year in 2025. One of the things we're doing, there's a whole array of things, from public service announcements and ads and events, Marine Weeks. We worked last summer to get Congress to pass a law to mint a coin for the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps. So the U.S. Mint's going to print a series of coins, 3 of them, in 2025 that people can purchase online, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's great. The last time the Marine Corps did that was well over 20 years ago, right?
It was 2005.
Okay.
And we minted a silver dollar with the flag raising on Iwo Jima on one side and Eagle of Anchor on the other. At that point, that was the most popular coin the Mint had ever produced. These are legal tender. These are coming out of the U.S. Mint. So it's the Treasury Department that does this for us. It was a great experience working with Congress to get them to pass the law to authorize the Mint to do this.
Right.
Because this is what it takes. So we spent a lot of time walking the halls of Congress, talking to mostly Marine representatives in the House and Senate and asking for their help.
Yeah.
And they did. So like any Marine, they made it happen.
Right.
In the Senate, it was unanimous, the vote to approve this. In the House, it was 409-1. There was one representative, not a Marine, who just has a thing against coins, I think. So
okay. Well, I guess that's what's so great about the process is he can vote however he wants to, but we got the coin done, and great. He gets to be that one guy.
Yeah, and it's the only coin the Mint's going to do in 2025.
Which is interesting because if I understand this correctly, the Treasury usually does 2 a year, and there's people who apply for it, and they have to, and it is literally an act of Congress, like you just explained. Right. And so, as I understand it, the Treasury Department must feel that there's going to be such an overwhelming demand for this coin that they're like, we're only going to do one this year.
That's exactly right. And they love the Marine Corps coin. They know it's going to be hugely popular. The initial minting is authorized over 1 million coins to start with. Last time we did this, there was a second run that was done because the demand was so high. So
Right.
yeah, it's pretty exciting.
And hats off to Major General Bobby Shea, right? Because I'm sure she was massively influential in getting the word out and probably behind the scenes a little bit of the whipping the votes a little bit for us.
Yeah, Office of Legislative Affairs and General Shea and the Marine Corps very supportive of this all the way through. So it's great. It's going to be a good thing for Marines everywhere to be able to recognize the 250th.
Yeah, that's great. And for listeners who are interested, I've had Lieutenant General Dave Furness on twice. And in one of the two episodes, I think it's the first one, he talks about his time in OLA and talks about what an interesting time that was in his career. So be sure to check out that episode because it's a good story.
It was interesting. There was something I saw on the news recently about how few pieces of legislation the Congress is able to pass in 2023. And it said there's 23 pieces of legislation passed or something like that. And it said, and one of them was a commemorative coin for the United States Marine Corps, which was ours. So we got one of the laws that was highlighted.
That's so fantastic. I'm childhood friends with a sitting member of Congress right now from New Jersey, Tom Kane from New Jersey 7th. And I recently got together, my wife and I got together with him and his wife and had dinner. It was when all this was going on. I said, hey, by the way, have you voted on this thing? He goes, oh yeah. He goes, there's some retired lieutenant general who's a member of Congress. He's like, and he's just out there like poking people and saying like, have you voted for this thing? Have you voted for this thing? So we had the Marine Corps people out there of all different ranks and ages just really trying to get that done. I got a kick out of hearing that story.
Yeah, General Bergman was a bulldog.
Bergman,
it was great.
Yes, thank you. Yes, great. So
that was good. Like I said, I'm really lucky to be part of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation that continues to support the preservation of history, both here at the museum and across the country, and a lot of things we do. It's a really great organization to be a part of.
Yeah. And it's such a fantastic museum. I like to joke that when you think, if you've never been to the Marine Corps Museum before and you close your eyes and you think, what does the Marine Corps Museum look like? A lot of people think it's an old Amtrak in front of a Quonset hut kind of thing. And it's not. I mean, that facility is so unbelievable. So if you're a Marine or you're listening to this and you have family who is in the Marine Corps or anything like that, like go see the Marine Corps Museum because it is just so impressive. I never get tired of it. I look on my camera roll and I've taken the same picture inside that museum of the Corsair hanging from the ceiling probably 80 different times. And I just keep taking pictures of it. It's just so impressive. The place is just
and it
amazing.
continues to get better, Dave. I got to give credit to the Marine Corps on this. So the Marine Corps University runs the actual staff of the museum. And there's a director of the National Museum of the Marine Corps. It's a GS civilian. So there's a whole staff of museum folks. And that's the reason why it can be open to the public free of charge, 363 days a year.
Yeah.
And it's because the Marine Corps actually runs the museum. The foundation raised the hundreds of millions of dollars to build it and to continue to support the preservation of history. But it's a Marine Corps and foundation partnership that makes it so good here at the museum.
Right. How can people keep supporting financially the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation and the upkeep in the museum?
Yeah, so really easy to support to us. That's the way you support the museum is by contributing to the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. And easy to do on our website, marineheritage.org, or just Google National Museum of the Marine Corps and link over to our page from the museum page. But we're the nonprofit, 501c3. That our mission, everything that gets contributed to the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation gets poured back into the museum and history division and supporting the preservation of our traditions in the Marine Corps. So that's what we do.
That's great. Thanks. And there's also, for people who are also interested in this, I will put in a plug for reaching out to your planned giving people because you can actually say, okay, when I pass away, I want whatever remaining in my estate or whatever sort of money to go to the Marine Corps. So it can be an estate planning tool for people as well too. So you can kind of give then or give now or a combination of both. And I think that's a really interesting, creative way to do it.
Now, planned gifts are great because you don't have to write a check now.
Right.
In other words, you're just saying that I'm going to commit to later on when I go that a percentage of my estate will go to the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways. So when you get to a certain age and your IRA needs to have required minimum distributions that come out, there are great ways to save on taxes by having that go directly to a nonprofit like us, a charitable contribution. So we do all that.
Right.
From planned gifts to qualified charitable distributions. There's a whole program that makes it really easy to do for people who want to support us to give us.
That's great. Well, thanks for an update on the museum. I really appreciate that. It's exciting to be a part of. And I look forward to seeing you in May when we get a chance to have our awards dinner too. And that's always a great gala.
It really is. This place we didn't even talk about that, but there are events here all the time, even after hours. It's a great venue. We have receptions and parties and proms and all kinds of things, dinners like in May, we're going to have ours. It's going to be great.
Yesterday is probably a ton of promotions in there with it being the first, right? We're recording on the 2nd of February, so probably, I'm sure it was very busy yesterday.
Yeah, it's great. It's always good when the museum's full of people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then, of course, there's the Ton Tavern there.
Sure. I'm going to lunch here in a couple hours.
Right. We better get going with this then. Exactly. So, well, yeah, great. Thanks for that update. But so before you were the CEO of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation, you were once Second Lieutenant Lukeman. I'm kind of curious because I always like to start these conversations out. There's probably nobody left on active duty that remembers you as a second lieutenant, right? So I'm guessing there, but everybody starts out in the Marine Corps as either an O1 or an E1, and then you make it 30 or 40 years like you did. Tell me some of the stories that you remember from your first 5 years of your career, and you look back on those and say, I didn't realize it at the time, but wow, was that a crystallizing moment in leadership?
Well, yeah, you're right. There's nobody around from 1980 when I was commissioned as a second lieutenant. But I went down to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines to my first duty station. And my story is probably a little different than some because I was a mess as a second lieutenant. So a little bit of arrested development. And I think back on it and why that was. And part of it was the first unit I came into. So it took me a little longer to learn than some, I think. Just by chance, the billet they needed to fill in 1-2 when I came in as a brand new second lieutenant was 81s. Okay. So I went to the 81s platoon first.
Right off the bat?
Right off the bat, out of the base, out of IOC. My company commander was an alcoholic, and so would sleep it off in the morning in his office, and some Marines pick him up sometimes walking back to the base. My platoon sergeant was an alcoholic and was sometimes drunk at work. And when I checked into the platoon, I think about a third of them were UA. So I'm thrown into this initial situation, didn't do well with it, frankly. It was a challenge to figure out, what am I supposed to do with this? And I think my default was I tried to do too much as the lieutenant and didn't understand how to use my leaders in the unit. So it took me a while to figure that out. And I really didn't figure it out until I got moved later on. So after doing the 81s for a year or so, there were some changes. We were getting ready to deploy, went to Okinawa for a UDP, and they said, okay, you're going over to Alpha Company, take a rifle platoon now. Okay. Which was the best thing that ever happened, because all of a sudden now I'm in a company where they're used to having brand new lieutenants. And I had a great Staff Sergeant Vinny was my platoon sergeant, great company commander, Dave Dotter, who went on to retire as a colonel. I know Dave Dotter really well. Yeah. I had no idea you and I had that connection together. He was my Anglico commander. Yep. He was my first real company commander. Really? In Alpha Company 1-2. And so I started to learn what I was supposed to do. But that first year was kind of lost. I was lost, really, is what it was. And, okay. So it took me a little while. So that experience started to get better with Alpha Company 1-2. Had a great time. The lieutenants pulled together. XO was Jim Quinlan. He was a character. There was one time when we were out in the field doing training, and Captain Dotter decided to go out one night and visit one of the squads or one of the platoons, something like that. So the rest of the lieutenants and the XO are sitting back at the CP, and we're there. And the captain had taken off his captain's bars because he was going to go out on patrol, and he gave them to the XO. Mm-hmm. So we all thought, Jim said, hey, you don't have a hair on your ass if you don't cut those bars in half and promote us all to first lieutenant. Right now. Oh, that's great. So he took the, some wire snips and cut his captain's bars in half, and we put them all on our collars, promoted ourselves to first lieutenant. That's awesome. And then when the captain came back looking for his captain bars, Jim said, no, sir, I don't have them. I don't know where they are. He just lied. So we got busted later by the Bravo Company commander, who heard the story and ended up telling Captain Dotter what we did afterwards. But it was a good time. Oh, that's a hysterical story. I wonder if he even remembers that. Yeah, I'm sure he does. Yeah. And later on, his son also became a Marine. And later on, his son worked with me over in Korea, some 30 years later. So there's a lot of that in the Marine Corps, that what goes around comes around again. Tell me about your first platoon sergeant then, because you mentioned him by name. He must have been pretty influential. Why? He was the one that every lieutenant, I think, looks for, that knows how to be that bridge between you and the Marines, and helped me understand how to communicate with the platoon, with the squad leaders and the Marines, mm-hmm. Which, again, I like I said, I think I tried to do more myself in my first platoon because I didn't know how to use the leaders that were there. So Staff Sergeant Vineyard helped me understand, no. This is a team effort, right? Everybody has a job. This is where you do. This is what I do. This is what they do. It's all going to work. Right. And we had a very close relationship, even after I left the company and went on to do other things, stayed in touch for a while. That was the first staff NCO that I had that was really showed me how to do it.
I hear that a lot from the interviews that I do, that how influential that first relationship is between a brand new second lieutenant and their staff NCO or some of the other NCOs. And then when I ask the question in reverse, kind of interesting, when I ask a sergeant major in the interview, I say, tell me about I had 5 brand new lieutenants over the course of the time that I was a staff NCO. So it's kind of different for us as officers because we have that one moment where we have that connection with a platoon sergeant for the very first time, and they have 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
And you think about the impact that one person has on 5 or 6 officers. It's an incredibly overlooked dynamic and relationship in the Marine Corps. I find people ask all the time that when I see second lieutenants down at TBS, they're asking questions in a number of different ways, but it's always grounded in the context of, can you answer this question in a way that will give me a hack or a tip for being a better first lieutenant or better lieutenant when I first show up at my unit? That's what they all really want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I think that's one of the things, which is you just got to develop. And hey, staff NCOs that are listening to this, your impact on a brand new officer, because General Eric Smith was the second lieutenant and he had a platoon sergeant as his very first platoon sergeant. And you never know who's going to be the commandant when you're a platoon sergeant for somebody, or a sergeant major of the Marine Corps when you're a second lieutenant.
Right. My next 2 assignments after leaving 1-2 really set me up for success in a way that helped correct the slow start, if you will. So after I left 1-2, I came up here to Quantico. I was assigned to the Staff NCO Academy, which it was interesting because we used to have officers running the Staff NCO Academy. As the director of the career course, the course for sergeants, I had 9 handpicked gunnies who were instructors and a first sergeant. So here again, I'm a first lieutenant, then became a young captain, and I've got a first sergeant, I've got 9 gunnies who are all good. So this is what a staff NCO can be. This is what right looks like. And we're teaching. That's our job, was to teach the NCOs how to be staff NCOs. And so I got that experience up here at Quantico and then went right back to the fleet as a young captain. So didn't go to AWS, which is where I wanted to go.
Okay.
But I think, frankly, because my early lieutenant fitness reports weren't very good, because they reflected my actual performance. They said, no, you're going back to the fleet. So which was fine with me.
Right.
So I go down to 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines as a young captain.
Oh, what year was that? Because isn't that where Dale Alford was?
It was. And Dale came in right as I was leaving. So Dale came in 89. I came in 86.
Okay.
So I run down there in May of 86 to try to get a company. And come in, and the XO says, you're going to be the 3 Alpha. And I said, I want to be a company commander. And he says, you're going to be the 3 Alpha. So I go in and see the CO. I want to be a company commander. You're going to be the 3 Alpha. Okay, got it.
Right.
So this is 1986, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines. So the 3 Alpha is Tom Waldhauser. So Major Waldhauser is the 3 Alpha. Lima Company's Captain Joe Dunford.
I've heard of him too. Yeah.
Weapons Company is Captain Mark Gerganis.
Oh gosh.
The ADGE is Fred Padilla.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. And so it's one of these units like Dale was in and others have been in, where there's a group, you see this a lot in the Marine Corps, where a group of captains in a battalion all end up, for whatever reason, going on to be very successful. So I check in. Again, I'm a young captain. First time I'm in a battalion like this, and I think this is how everybody is, right? This is how all battalions are. This is what the Marine Corps is. It's the Waldhauser, Dunfords, Gerganis. This is what it's about, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really fortunate to be able to observe as the 3 Alpha, these company commanders doing their job and seeing how the battalion operated, and really was able to learn how to do it.
Who is the battalion commander?
Named Larry Zinser.
Okay.
So he's still around. He retired as a colonel, went on to Marine Corps Security Force Regiment as a colonel. Great guy, but not somebody you would have necessarily heard of.
Yeah, but he set the conditions for success for that group of people. I mean, all those Marines are great men in and of themselves, right? But somebody set the conditions for success in that command climate. Somebody set it up for them to grow. Talk to me about that. I have this theory that water seeks its own level. So if a group of people from that unit all went on to be successful, something was going on there. What do you think that was?
It was a good time in the Marine Corps. And by the way, this is the same unit that, like you said, Dale Alford joins 3 years later. Mm-hmm. So it carries on. Yeah. At that point was early in the Mao SOC, or SOC Mao, I think we called it, process. There was no MEU playbook. There was no lock-on training. It was the beginning of that. So Mike Myatt was the 2-6 MAU commander that we were going out as a BLT with.
God, there's a name too. Yeah.
Yeah. We produced our own training plan. In other words, we created it and trained to the standards. And then later they became a standard thing. But at the time, there wasn't one. So it was a lot of initiative and opportunity for us to learn how to do a specific mission that we were going out to do. I think the environment was just such that we had smart folks that were able to do that. I don't know.
Yeah. But, human beings are fallible. There must have been some failures or things that didn't work. Do you recall any time where there were some failures in leadership, and what did people or you learn when you saw that? Because if you're kind of setting something up that didn't really exist before, there had to be some trial and error, things that worked, things that didn't. And
yeah, my memories of 3-6 are all really, really positive. I went on to be a company commander. I took Lima company from Joe Dunford. So,
wow.
So he left after we came back from our first deployment.
Do you have a picture of that change of command?
I do not.
Oh, I remember. Bummer. I was going to ask you for it. Okay.
We were out in front of the barracks, down at Camp Lejeune. I say I have 2 tours at Lejeune and 1 at Lejeune. So that was a tour at Lejeune. Yeah, I don't have a picture for that.
Gosh,
I don't think I do. No.
Okay. Well, if you come across one, let me know. I'd want to post it along with this episode. But how about some of the successes? What were some of your personal successes early on in your career? Let's say like from where you are in the story right now in 3-6 all the way back down to second lieutenant. There must have been times in your career where you had some sort of success. And I know people are humble, but like, can you talk about something that you did, a success you're really proud of, be like, you know what, that was a really seminal moment for me?
You don't think about, like you said, people don't think about those very often because it's part of the job. I remember being really proud of some of the training evolutions in the company. So again, I followed Joe Dunford in Lima company. So the company's set up for success already. And my XO is a guy named Bob Durkin, who also retired as a colonel. Great guy. He was the XO in the company. First Sergeant Carpenter was a great first sergeant. So, I mean, the company was set up in the right way for me when I came in. And we were getting ready to go to Okinawa. But I think what felt really good is that we felt like we were really good. We were training. And when we went to the field and exercised, it was exciting. It was dynamic. We were doing live fire ambushes, and it just felt like we were doing what we were supposed to do in the Marine Corps.
Right.
My overall experience of that time as a company commander was just one of being real happy and real positive. It's probably the highlight of 40 years of active duty was my time as Lima 3-6.
Okay. Interesting. And so you left 3-6. What year was that? Right before Desert Storm, or?
Yes. So, no, not Desert Storm, right before Just Cause down in Panama. So
sure. That's
come back from Okinawa in summer of 89, spring of 89. I stayed with the battalion, went down to Panama to set up 3-6, who was going in at that time before Just Cause. So we spent some time down in Panama, and then I went to AWS backwards, right? So after being a company commander and a 3 Alpha and loading a BLT aboard ship as the 3 Alpha, and doing all landing. Then I go to AWS and learn how to do landing plans, But that was great because, again, now General Waldhauser's now an instructor at AWS when I go through with a whole bunch of Kevin Brickhouse, Paul Lefevre. These guys were all instructors at AWS when I went through too. So, I mean, again, the Marine Corps is such a small place, and you remember all these people that had an influence on you. So AWS was a great year. And then this is where my career really takes weird turns, and it's not a career anybody would ever plan out. After AWS, they said, well, you're not going back to the fleet. You were already a company commander, and it's not time to be a major yet, because back then we didn't promote to major until 12 years in the Marine Corps. And so I went to MSG duty over in Eastern Europe as an inspecting officer for a couple of years. And then when I left that as a selected major, I said, but no, you can't go back to the fleet yet. I'm like, okay, well, what is there to do?
Yeah.
So I ended up going to be an MOI. At the University of Texas at Austin. So these are 2 jobs that are unusual for most infantry Marine officers, MSG duty and MOI. Again, it worked out just great for me. I had a great time at the University of Texas.
Okay, I want to talk about the MSG thing, but I want to talk about the MOI thing first, because that's the last thing you said. You're a product of an ROTC commissioning, correct?
Yes.
Okay, me too. So when I think back to my MOI, I didn't know enough to know what made a good officer or didn't make a good officer. I just observed officers. They had different personalities. I had 2 different MOIs. one was way more influential in just me developing as a person than the other one was. And same thing with the assistant MOIs, which for listeners who don't know the ROTC lingo, that's the enlisted counterpart to the Marine Officer Instructor. And I'm wondering if you, when you became an MOI, did you reflect back on your time as a midshipman and say, okay, I remember when, so therefore I am going to lead like this. And these are the things that I think are important to instill upon young midshipmen to set them up for success as brand new commissionees.
Yes, in so many words. I had a great MOI at Ken Burns at the University of Notre Dame, who I still communicate with now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was a modeling on looking back on how he did it with what I did at the University of Texas, but everything changes a little bit. It was a great experience to teach young midshipmen. It's interesting. I guess what I would say is when they come in as freshmen, it's hard to imagine some of them as a Marine Corps officer.
Sure.
When they're 18 years old or 19 years old. And I remember one midshipman coming in and saying, and I'm telling myself, there is no way this Marine is going to be a Marine Corps officer. This man is going to be a Marine Corps officer. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And he retired as a colonel a few years ago.
Wow.
So he did great and was a commander, and he was terrific. So they grow up and they change is what it is. But again, I think the theme for a lot of this stuff, Dave, as I think back through some of these different assignments, it is people. I remember the people that I worked with. When I was an MOI, the OSO in Austin, Texas, was Eric Smith.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He and I worked together.
Sure.
On officers and turning young civilians into Marines. But then later on, I have this connection still with General Smith. So the Marine Corps is that way, that as you go through it, the relationships you make with folks that mean a lot to you makes all the difference. And those good examples are what you try to pass on to younger Marines.
That's great. When you look back on your time as MOIs, was there, I'm gonna guess the answer is academics, so don't say that. But what were some of the things that caused those men and women that came in and wanted to become Marine Corps officers to fail and not receive a commission?
It really wasn't academics.
Oh, it wasn't? Okay.
No, it was discipline. It wasn't because they couldn't do the work. It's because they didn't do the work.
Right.
In other words, it may have been academics, but it was because you stopped going to class.
Right.
It wasn't because you weren't smart enough. It was not being disciplined enough to do it. And when that exposes itself, or a flaw, some other character flaw that shows up, infidelity or alcoholism or something like that, that's the time to get it. In other words, that's time to say, okay, now this isn't for you. Find another path.
Right.
And move them on. So I never felt the pressure like recruiting, that you have to push these midshipmen through. If they weren't ready to become officers, then they weren't going to become officers. That was good for us.
That was in the early 90s.
Yeah, 92 to 95 is when we were in Texas. Yeah.
Okay, so I call that post Top Gun ROTC. So it was still probably a really big unit. You probably had a waiting list of people that wanted to.
We grew the Marine side pretty well while I was there, which is important. You want to provide a good example, so that a bunch of the naval midshipmen want to be Marines. I mean, that's always the goal.
Yeah.
But it was a good unit. Yeah. University of Texas, great place, great school, good unit.
Was it big?
Not huge. So it was 150 or so, Navy and Marine altogether.
Yeah.
Whereas some schools have, 300-400. A&M, obviously A&M up the street was the Corps cadets and the unit there. Notre Dame, Tulane had a huge unit at the time. So
okay. So back to the MSG, I'm curious, what sort of aha moments did you have on MSG? Because frankly, you're the only person I've ever talked to that's an officer that's done MSG, or maybe I've met them, but they just haven't talked about it. But so that must have been a really unique leadership experience for you. Can you take some time to talk about some of the lessons you learned on there, and maybe some of the great examples of leadership you saw, and maybe some of the failures you saw there?
Yeah, a great opportunity for staff NCOs to exercise independent leadership and show initiative. Mm-hmm. Each of these embassy detachments of Marines is led by a staff NCO, staff sergeant or a gunny usually. And there's anything from 5 or 6 Marines to 25, 26 Marines, maybe 30 at larger embassies. Mm-hmm. And they are there with the Department of State, holding on to what it means to be a Marine, in spite of the fact that you're surrounded by civilians. And so the challenge for those staff NCOs is to keep those Marine security guards Marines.
Okay.
When they're surrounded by civilians and they're the only Marines in the country in some cases.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity for leadership on their part. And so as we came through, as inspecting officers, you visit a det twice a year. And we had Eastern Europe was our territory, from Germany up to Finland, out to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and down to Ankara, Turkey, and all the countries in between. And this was 90, 91, 92. So the wall had come down, but it was still very much communist in all those Eastern European countries. So it was a lot of fun. It was like the Wild West, traveling around there.
Yeah, I'll bet. Wow.
The goal was to ensure they were staying Marine in fitness, in appearance, in actions. Hey, you're the Marines. You're holding the standard here. That's what it is.
Right.
And that's what we expect of you. And that's what everybody expects of you. Every so often, a Marine would feel like, hey, I'm part of the Department of State. I'm this special thing. I'm like, no.
Okay.
There's one standard. It's the Marine Corps standard.
Right.
And that's the standard that we adhere to. I've always felt that in every job I've had. It's not my standard. It's the Marine Corps standard.
You just reminded me, I guess, I don't know why I don't instinctively think about it, but there's no officers out there at all in any of those, but there's officers that come in and inspect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming at some point in your career inspecting those, you must have identified a problem and probably had to relieve some people or move some people. Are there some stories you can talk about that can be heard by listeners and as an example of, oh, geez, okay, that's really good to know. Don't do that.
Yeah, there are. So Bucharest, Romania.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was bleak back then. I remember going to a hotel there. The door to my room had been, you could tell where somebody had broken it open with like a screwdriver or something, Yeah. And that's where we're staying. And they're stealing the light bulbs out of the hallway. And it was Wild West, like I said, in Bucharest. But so what happened there was the local Romanian drivers that were driving the Marines around started bringing hookers to the embassy at night when there were just 2 Marines on duty in the embassy.
Okay.
And so he would bring prostitutes to the embassy and the Marines would be having relations there in the embassy. And this was all part of an espionage thing. Think Lone Tree in Moscow. It was to work through this, to blackmail, to get behind the embassy line to do something.
Probably State Department people too, right? I mean, it wasn't just the Marines, was it?
Well, all I know about was Marines being, I don't know if there was any State Department folks involved with this, but a new MSG checks in and he's like, okay, I didn't think this is what they taught me was supposed to happen in school.
Okay, so a young Marine then.
A young Marine. So when we come in for our inspection, young Marine says, this doesn't seem right to me. I think this is going on. And we're like, okay.
Oh,
so
wow.
we fire the whole det, except for the one young Marine, because everybody's gone. And bringing in a temporary group to do it and figure it all out and do the espionage case and figure, and I don't think there were any secrets compromised in that case, but it was on the way to having another one of those Time magazine covers of a Marine with a black eye.
Right.
But caught it before that happened.
Wow. That's incredible. Basically sat everybody down and said, you're getting on a plane, you're going home, and you have to bring in a whole new crew and they don't know anything except with that young Marine who brought the whole thing to the surface.
Yeah, we brought other MSGs from other detachments. So it weren't like they were inexperienced with how to do the job. It was just you bring them over from some other place and temporarily fill in. Yeah.
That's crazy.
We lost another det commander for having an affair with a local woman while married.
Oh, common thread there. Yeah. But it's just interesting to hear people tell stories about the things that caused leadership failures or people not to be successful. I'm sure there's, on the other side of that coin, some success stories too. I want to come back to you for a second, because at this point in your career, if you go backwards to second lieutenant, 81 millimeter platoon commander, and your comment about I got bad fitness reports because of my performance.
Yeah.
What were some of your personal failures? And in the course of answering that question, can you spend some time talking about how it was handled by your commander and some area that you were not meeting a standard on? It was then addressed by your commander. What did you learn from that? And did any of your experiences then shape who you were as a general? Because fast forwarding, people heard your bio, but you were a division commander. I'm assuming at some point in your command time as a division commander, there were some people who got relieved. And I'm just wondering if there was some drawing of experiences between those two things.
Yeah. My big mistakes as a second lieutenant were, again, I talk about it as trying to do it myself. Smart, physically fit, tactically proficient, all the things that Marines are coming out of IOC.
Mm-hmm.
Can do it all.
Right.
But that's not your job as a platoon commander to do it all. And so when I perceived a lack of of others taking care of the problem. In other words, I didn't have a platoon sergeant that I felt was doing what he was supposed to be doing. Didn't have section leaders that understood that I felt were doing what they needed to be doing. I tried to step in and be all those things and do it. And so the reaction by Marines is, hey, if he wants to do that, fine, let him go. We'll see how long he lasts doing it that way.
Okay.
It's like that question they ask, what's the guidance you give to a gunny when you want to tell them how to put up a flagpole is, it's just gunny put up the flagpole. But I was over there trying to dig a hole and measure a side and do it all myself. What I don't remember getting from anyone at that point was, hey, Lukeman, that's not the way to do it. This is what you need to do. So I think I floundered a bit. I wasn't getting guidance on how to do it right as a lieutenant. It's easy to see that, right? It's easy to see when a unit's not working well together from the outside.
Sure.
So it was like, hey, he's not doing well down on 81s, and that platoon is not doing what we want it to do. Let's move him over to a rifle company to get a fresh start as a platoon commander.
Okay.
So that was a good move.
So second chance.
Second chance. Right. And it worked out. So everybody's experience is different up front. So what did I learn from that? One, I guess I didn't get fired, which is good. I mean, I was able to stay on in the Marine Corps. And I think the time it really turned around was being able to come back to the 3-6, which was just a fortuitous assignment. Again, I was the last captain into that unit. They just needed one more. And they said, well, you're not going to AWS because, you don't look that competitive to us. Yeah. We'll send you back to the fleet,
right?
Which is perfect, to go back to the fleet. Everybody wants to do that. So that was the move that changed it all. So yeah, I guess I was fortunate that I was able to survive that first tour, but I didn't think about it at the time. You're always trying to just do the best you can.
Sure.
You look forward to, like you said, going forward and having to relieve people when they aren't measuring up. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But really important. It happens much more as you get more senior, obviously, as you get to be a colonel or a general. Then there's people that need to be relieved.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like asking this question too, sir, because when people get relieved, there is a natural hush, hush, don't talk about it. Oh, we're not talking about that. That's, confident, whatever. But everybody knows it happens. So I feel like people don't really learn from it because it's not talked about. It's not exposed. That's so much why I like asking that question. And I'm just wondering if I can peel it back a little bit further. I don't want names or anything that would ever identify or embarrass somebody, but is there something that you can tell listeners about, the very first time I had to release somebody, and actually I'd prefer it if you tell the story from your battalion commander and senior to that. What can you tell somebody who's listening to this that is going to, if they stay in the Marine Corps, they are inevitably going to face a situation where they have to relieve somebody. It's a hard thing to do. Do you have some advice?
Yes. But going back to the second lieutenant thing, as you were talking, I realized that second lieutenants are supposed to make mistakes, right? You should allow that. I was lucky and that I did. I made some mistakes and I got a second chance and I was able to survive. So same thing with young Marines. They make mistakes. And as long as it's not a sin of the heart, as long as it's not a character flaw, if it's just, you're just not doing it right yet.
Right. Or illegal or
illegal. Right. As long as it's not that, as long as it's just, hey, you don't know what to do yet.
Right.
I was lucky to have time to grow up and learn how to do it. So you should be allowed to make mistakes and continue on generally. But as you said, as you get more senior and as you have more responsibility, the tolerance for that needs to be narrower because people die. And so the times when you have to relieve somebody, you want to first make sure you understand what it is that's going on that's causing this problem and take the time to look into it. I always wrote down, and I still have them. It would start out with, why am I relieving so-and-so? And then write it out so that I know I understand why I'm doing this.
Oh, that's great advice.
What their failure was in leadership. And it was always that. It wasn't, there's probably times when people got in trouble for drinking and I had to relieve them, but those are easy. Illegal behavior that you relieve somebody for is easy.
Right.
The challenge is when someone isn't competent and their incompetence can cost lives, that you have to then step in and say, you can't continue. I mean, with the unit getting ready to go to Afghanistan, when I was 2nd Marine Division, we were generating forces to go to Afghanistan. And if that unit that is getting ready to go, the commander can't lead it, then that commander has to go and we have to find somebody else that can take that unit in.
Right. And did that actually happen?
It did, yeah.
Okay. So, and just on that, because I feel like, I guess when I think back on it, you're a battalion commander. I'm assuming you're talking about a battalion commander level leadership, right? Okay.
Yep.
Or higher. So, I mean, at that point, you've got 20 years in. And you have been through promotions and billets and fitness reports and
Screened for command.
yes, even more importantly, you have been screened for command. And then they get into command and are found by the division commander to be unfit to lead that unit in combat. I mean, how does that happen, sir?
Yeah, there's a couple of cases. There were two specific incidents. This is one, the leader failed to take on challenges in the unit. So there was hazing in the unit, and the leader was either oblivious to it or didn't care about it or condoned it. And that leader had to go because after trying to get them to fix it, it wasn't getting fixed.
Okay.
So, okay, you give them a shot, fix it. You're not fixing it. Okay, you got to go. And that person, again, was screened for command. In another case, the officer was really a fine young officer in command of a battalion, but I think lost focus of a big picture and was focused very narrowly on some aspects of getting his unit ready to go to Afghanistan, but not focused on enough. So it's hard to explain without the details. There was a training accident where many Marines were killed and wounded. And in the investigation into what happened in that accident, it was clear that that unit wasn't ready to do the mission that the battalion commander was asking them to do. So he had them doing a training exercise that was beyond their capability. They hadn't done the prep work for it, but he did anyway and resulted in the deaths of several Marines. He shouldn't have done that. It was bad judgment on his part and an inability to understand the capabilities of his unit at the time.
Is it fair to say that a component of that issue was a function of ego or hubris?
This particular officer didn't present that. I've seen some like that as well that think they know it all. I think this was just an inability to see the forest for the trees. It was too narrow of a focus. He had a plan he wanted to execute and didn't look around and see if the plan that he wanted to execute was actually doable.
Right. So curious, because we were talking about lieutenants and how they should be able to make mistakes. And I agree with that. I think, there are, again, the errors that are, breaking regulations and just bad judgment. That's one thing. But so now I want to go back to you being a battalion commander, and you've got this intermediary layer of captains, right?
Yeah.
Who are probably, coming in way more hot than you are. And I always like to joke, like when I was a captain, man, I ran hot as a captain because it's really the first time that you're truly in charge of something. Yeah. So you want to come in and you want to do all those things and you want to do everything better than the captain you had when you were a lieutenant. And, it's just funny. I don't think that attitude about lieutenants has changed much, but so now you've got you on one end, you got the lieutenants on the other, and you've got this middle swath of captains. Did you experience some times where you saw lieutenants kind of messing up, but like maybe the captains were coming to you and be like, we got to get rid of this kid? Or do you have any good stories about the relationship between a lieutenant colonel and lieutenants in an infantry battalion?
Yeah, that's great. So I had a blast as a battalion commander too. I had a great time as a company commander, and that sets you up well for being a battalion commander later on. So let me tell a quick story. So I'm slated for 1-5, and we're going across country from East Coast to West Coast to take over 1-5 in a month or two, I think is what was supposed to happen. And we're driving across country, and we're going to take like 10 days. Got 2 dogs and 2 kids and my wife and everything in the car, and we're going to do up to Niagara Falls and then do some other stuff on the way. At this point in the drive, I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and we had cell phones at this point. This is 2001. So cell phone rings, and it's my regimental commander, who I'm getting 5th Marines. Just happens to be Joe Dunford, who, again, I know from previous time. But anyway, says, hey, so this is what my wife hears driving the car. She hears, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, I'll call you back.
Okay.
So she looks at me and she goes, what? No. So here's what happened. So the CEO of 2-5, great guy, Rick Detriquet, had just deployed to Okinawa to be part of 31st MU, BLT 2-5. So he had gotten there a week before, and his son was diagnosed with leukemia. And so like, hey, no, Rick, you're coming home because this is serious. So Colonel Dunford says, hey, Jim, I need you to go to Okinawa and take 2-5 now, not 1-5, who's getting ready to start their workup for a deployment, a year from now.
You're parachuting in. I'm
parachuting into the BLT that's already deployed and joined 31st MU. It's like, okay, you need me to get on a plane in Chicago and fly out? And he said, no, just get here. So we drive 4 days across country, get to Pendleton. Came there on Thursday. Colonel Dunford helped me get quarters on base on Friday. Household goods came Saturday, and I left Sunday and went to Okinawa.
Wow.
So it was great. So again, I parachuted into 2-5, and Mike Lowe is rest in peace. Mike Lowe, another great guy, was 31st MU commander, and I had never met him before.
Mm-hmm.
So I meet him as we're doing the brief for the SOCX or whatever. You know, we're coming into this thing, and so I told the staff and the commanders, I said, "Look, we're not slowing down a second. You guys know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing. We're just going to move." So when the commander says, "Can you brief in 6 hours?" I'm going to say, "Yes, sir." I said, "We're going to do it." So,
right.
And we did. And they knew what they were doing. And I knew what I was doing. I felt really prepared to be a battalion commander at that time. So I guess one of the lessons here is be ready. When your number's called, it's time. And so I felt really good about that. And later on, Michael O said, "Hey, I was really worried about Lukeman coming in here with this change, what was going to happen." He said, "But, he did really good." And I was like, "Well, what do you expect? This is we know what we're doing."
Right.
That was a good experience. But so, yes, so I met my company commanders, met staff, did all that kind of stuff. And back to your question about the lieutenants, you're right. There's a big separation between lieutenant colonel and captain.
Right. And just for context, what year was this?
2001, right before 9/11.
Right.
So,
okay.
So 9/11 happens while we're deployed to Okinawa.
Got it. Check.
Which was pretty exciting too. So I was fairly senior at that point. Now, at that point, I guess I got 21 years in the Marine Corps. And so lieutenants have got 2.
Right.
And the company commanders have got whatever it is, 10 or something like that. So there's a big gap between battalion commander and company commander, and even more with lieutenants. I've always felt like you need to give folks the space that commanders trust their subordinates. You get to know them. There's an intent thing. Obviously, they have to understand what you stand for. And I've got all those things. I always write everything down. I've got the remarks I made when I came into 2-5 written down to.
No kidding.
Yeah. What I told I met with, here's who I'm going to meet with first. I met with the sergeant major and the XO at the airport. I met with the company commanders, and then I met with the entire battalion, the NCOs and staff NCOs over the period of the first 48 hours I was in Okinawa, just to talk about, hey, here we go. We're moving. This is it. We're in the fight. We're going to keep doing this. We're not slowing down anything, and kind of tell you who you are. But I like to give folks space to do their job. I mean, that's what I enjoyed as a company commander. So again, you got to give them space to lead their lieutenants. But yeah, lieutenants get a lot of leeway in my mind.
Yeah.
As long as their intent is in the right direction,
mm-hmm.
That's good to go. You don't need to pursue every small transgression that occurs when it's done with good intent.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to screw up sometimes. That's okay.
And same thing for the staff NCOs too.
Right.
Probably goes for that too. And I always come back to, we trust sergeants to lead squads in combat in some of the most difficult conditions we can imagine. And then you come back to garrison and you say, okay, all E5s and below have to be in from Liberty at 10 o'clock at night. There's something that goes on there that's an interesting study in our culture. But
I also approach problems to try not to blow them out of proportion. So in Okinawa, during our deployment there, before 9/11 still, when this happened, we started getting in a fight with 1-3 who was there. Our battalion and them something happened. And so there were fights every night between the two battalions.
Right.
So like, okay, knock this stuff off, because you can't have that happening on Okinawa. It's going to get in trouble. So I got all the NCOs in the theater. I think they thought it was going to be an ass chewing of some sort. And I said, no, this is 1% of the battalion that's got a problem. You are the solution. This is how we fix this, is with leadership. It's not with punishment. I said, we're doing great. Look at all the great things we've done as a battalion. Look what you're doing as NCOs. Matter of fact, I need to empower you with more responsibility and more authority to take care of this, because this isn't like us as 2-5. This isn't what we are. So let's go fix it together. It was a teamwork appeal, and to give them more authority to do the right thing, not restrict, not lock everybody down. It's like, sir, we got to lock everybody down. No, we're not locking everybody down. We're just going to empower the NCOs to fix the problem, because they're all good Marines. I mean, they're good Marines. They want to do the right thing. They just need to be told to do it sometimes.
Right. Interesting. You'll remember this because you were in the era of the old blue fitness reports. Mm-hmm. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, before the current fitness report system that everybody uses now, just in formatting, the blue fitness report was literally light blue, and you would have to put it into a typewriter and type on it. And there were questions where you would mark X, and you would it was basically a scale of 1 to 10. Think about it that way. There was an old question on there. Do you remember, sir? It was a section called moral courage.
Yes.
Maybe it was just courage. Now I'm really testing my memory, but you were only supposed to fill it out in combat. Do you remember that block?
Yes. Yeah.
I always come back to that and I think, why was moral courage only displayed in combat? Why are we marking this not observed?
Courage, not observed. That's right. It was courage. It was courage, not observed. I do remember that.
That's exactly what it was. Not observed.
Right.
And it was just sort of like, it was one of those urban legends that it was only filled out, right?
Right.
And if for some reason you mythically got that checked in the block as, outstanding, that somehow that was going to stand out to the board or whatever. But it has formed this next question that I have for you. It's in the context of battlefield courage versus moral courage, right? And I think there's a huge difference between those two things, even though they share that word courage. And I'm wondering, was there ever a moment in your career where you risked your career with a decision that required moral courage? Like, did you ever get scared about the career implications of making a decision that was based on having some moral courage?
I don't think it wasn't that clear. It wasn't that clear that I knew in my own mind, I'm putting my career on the line for this particular stance.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is because I never thought much about my own career. My father was a general officer.
Mm-hmm.
He told me early on, nobody makes general. And you don't think about that.
Right.
And I never did. And I was ready to get out as a lieutenant colonel if I didn't get battalion command. I was going to leave as lieutenant colonel. That's fine. I had come to peace with it because I wasn't selected for command right away. My first look was not selected for command.
Okay.
And then my second look, I think I was selected but not slated. And then I went to a joint job and I was not eligible. And all of a sudden, if I don't get selected and slated on this next round, I'm out, because I'm not going to get battalion command. So I said, okay, I can retire as lieutenant colonel. That's fine. But then, of course, I got selected and slated and became a colonel and then went on. So I never really thought about my career in the decisions. I think I really tried to focus on what was the right thing to do every time. And as long as you're comfortable with that this is the right thing, then I was okay with it. And I never wrestled with whether I should do something different, whether this is not, the hard part is to determine what the right thing to do is, not whether to do the right thing. It's what's the right answer here.
So interesting, because now you've had a couple of years in a civilian leadership role too. And I'm going to assume that you have learned some things in the civilian world that are some aha moments, like, oh, wow, after 30 plus years in the Marine Corps, this is a surprise. I'm sure you've had those moments, but I have a couple of questions that I'd love for you to draw on both your military experience and then your recent experience as a leader in a civilian organization. But when you sit down and you think about your ability to select people to work for you, what are some characteristics that you look for in people when you hire them, because you're choosing them, versus in the Marine Corps, you're given people that came through the recruiting system, right? Like, you don't interview and hire people. And what were some things that you learned in the Marine Corps that have informed your ability to literally select people to come work for you in the organization?
First off, what you learn in the Marine Corps is it's all about the people.
Mm-hmm.
If you have bad people, if your people aren't up to speed, everything is hard. If you have good people, everything's easy. They make it happen.
Right.
This is why the Marine Corps has been so good about ensuring that the people we bring into the Marine Corps, you don't lower the entrance standards just because there's pressure on recruiting. You don't go to a different level of education or category or criminal behavior or something like that. You got to keep the standards where they are and just work through it and put more people on recruiting duty if that's what it takes to get them.
Right.
So standards are everything. The other thing that I've learned, I did this a lot when interviewing for aides as a CG. So when you're talking to the lieutenants and captains who are going to come be your aide, one of the litmus tests is, do I look forward to seeing this person every day? Is this somebody who,
sure,
for lack of a better word, that I like, because you're coming to work every day. And so if I don't feel like I get along, then that's not something we're going to do. Right. So you interview, you talk to them and, ask them what their background is and where they are and that kind of thing. Kind of have a judgment. One, do they have the qualifications for the job? That's a key, especially on the civilian side. You have to have the skill set. Show me some experience that shows you have that skill set. But then beyond that, is this somebody who will fit in with the team? Because it's a very positive environment and it needs to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just work, right? It's never just work. It's always being part of the team. And so is this person going to be part of the team?
Right.
When they come on? And how do you find that? I don't know, but that's part of what I look at when I look for people is, are you on board? Is this going to work with our team?
Yeah, that's a huge component of it too. And I don't think that even with 30 years of time in the Marine Corps, you don't learn that skill of, okay, I need to assess, because you're just giving people.
Mm-hmm.
Although I got to assume that when you were the CG, you probably had a lieutenant as a aide or a captain.
I did. I had a lieutenant in second MARDIV. I had a lieutenant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this statement is going to be a shock to you or not, but every single person that interviewed for that job didn't want it.
Right. And if they do, they're not the right person for it.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. So how did you select? You just said it had to be a personality fit.
Yeah.
What were some other things that you looked for when you were, because, there are lieutenants out there who are going to listen to this and they're going to be interviewing. It's just a numbers game, right? Somebody's going to be interviewing for it. What were some of your experiences with that?
One of the other things you look at is it right for them at that time? In other words, have they had the time as a platoon commander that they needed, and what's next for them? So you're not screwing up their career path by being an aide at a period of time. I always kept the aides 1 year. Well, when we start off, I tell them we have a 90-day get out of jail free card. Either one of us can, no fault divorce. If it's not working out for you, no harm, no foul, you're gone. If it's not working out for me, no harm, no foul, you're gone. We'll start over with somebody else, because there's an opportunity to get it wrong sometimes. And I only did that once, but we got it wrong.
No recourse to the lieutenant?
No damage. No damage. It just didn't work out. I pulled you up to do this. It's not working out. Send you back to the whatever job you're in.
Yeah, perfect.
And then you keep them for a year so as not to keep them out of their skill for too long, their job for too long, even though you love them. I had 2 great lieutenants aides when I was the CG second MARDIV. One got out of the Marine Corps later and is doing great. The other one's RSCO out in Colorado somewhere right now, doing great.
Oh, great. I think he's a fan of this podcast, actually.
He probably is. Yeah. I mean, it really is at that matter. All the people they send you, because you go out and make units nominate people, right?
Right.
And so you have to kind of understand if they're the kind of commander that's going to send you their worst lieutenant, or they're the kind of commander that's going to send their best lieutenant to you, and you look at who you got and figure it out. Because nobody wants to lose their good people, but you can figure all that out. And really, it was just whether it was a good fit, I think.
Yeah. I interviewed for a general's aide position for the assistant MEF commander. So the 1-star at the MEF. And I remember getting told, you're going up to interview for this job. And I thought to myself, I'm about to chop to a mew. Like, you're going to do this to me now? I remember the first thing that general, I can't remember who it was, but the first thing he asked me was, did you volunteer for this, or were you told by your unit to be here? And I said, I was told to come here. He said, do you want this job? I said, absolutely not. I'm about to chop to a mew. He's like, okay, you're excused.
Right.
That was the interview.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't even get past the chief with that.
Right.
I mean, the chief will be like, okay, yeah, you're not the right guy for this job.
Oh, geez, I don't remember interviewing with the chief.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you don't either. Sometimes you don't interview with the chief.
Yeah. But then I went back and got in big trouble by somebody named David Dodder. But okay. So
it's a small world. It comes around.
Well, it wasn't him. It was the XO who told me to do it, so it wasn't on him, but he was the CO at the time. So because of your time as a division commander, I love to ask this question about, like, at some point in your career, did you ever really fully realize the gravity of your command or your influence or your responsibility? And when I set this question up, I always do it in the context of, everybody recalls that beach scene on Saving Private Ryan where Tom Hanks' character, he's got the little mirror out there and he keeps sending people around the corner of the thing and the machine gun keeps killing people. And he's got to keep looking back in the line and be like, okay, you 3 next, you 3 next. That scene to me is the epitome of the moment when somebody understands the gravity and responsibility of their command. Did you have any moments like that in your career where all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, wow, that hit me like a ton of bricks?
Yeah. And you're right. As you move up, your previous commands and responsibilities give you the tools that make you ready for the next one. Right. So I never felt coming into a job I was unprepared or not ready for that assignment. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't hit you at some point with what it is. And usually it's, for me, at the division level, is when we lost Marines. That's what really brings it home, is that the cost of what you do as a leader at some point is to lose Marines in the service of the nation. So that's when it really hit home for me, and has the impact of wanting you to rededicate to prevent that from happening. You feel like you've done everything to prepare these Marines to go in harm's way.
Right.
And you've given them all the tools they need and the training and the leadership that they need to do that. But then is there more you can do?
Right.
So it's the personal loss of life, I think, that for me brings it home as a commander.
I know that people who listen to this are going to have that moment in their life. Is there something, when you look back on it, and maybe the answer is no, but is there something that a leader can do to prepare themselves emotionally or mentally for that inevitable moment when they are going to feel the impact and the gravity of their command?
I think you just do all that you can. I don't know what specifically you could do to prepare for that when it will hit you, the responsibility you have. And a lot of times when you think about these things is as you're taking the job, you start to think about what the responsibilities, what is my mission as a commanding general of a division? What's our job right now as a division? And you're developing, a commander's intent to pass on to the team that this is how we're going to lead this division in the coming years. So you're thinking about it then. But then once you're in it, you're executing and you're doing things all the time. And then some of these things will jump up and hit you. So maybe the time to really go back and look at your initial commander's intent every so often and remember what it is you're trying to do big picture wise as a unit.
Yeah, it's interesting because I really think the answer to that question has nothing to do with rank, because you'll remember I introduced you to my friend Tom Schumann, who's been a guest on the podcast. He was the one that brought the Naval Academy football team in for the museum during COVID. And he came on and I asked him a very similar question. And his answer was, within 90 seconds of me walking out of a fob as a second lieutenant in combat in Sangin with 3-5, within 90 seconds, I was in a complex ambush. And I thought to myself, my God, I had a lot of runway as a second lieutenant to get ready. And so sometimes that gravity of command can hit you within 90 seconds of your first time out on a patrol as a brand new second lieutenant. And my answer to that, or I think, is that you can't wait to prepare yourself for the eventuality of that moment happening, because it can really happen within 90 seconds of your first patrol as a second lieutenant in combat.
Yep. And it's the leader's job to prepare his Marines for that, right?
Yeah.
General Mattis was the master at this. When I was in 1st Marine Division in 2002, 2003 with him, and he imaged the entire division through what was going to happen. He used to talk about we as leaders have to prepare our Marines so that nothing is a surprise to them. Nothing's new. They've done this before in training. We need to image them through the fight so they're ready. It's a way to try to be ready for that 90 seconds when you walk out the fob. How do you get ready for it? Is we have to prepare them. We have to prepare them the right way. And so he just kept hammering that home over and over and over again and made it happen throughout the division. And a lot of Marines are here today because General Mattis was the commanding general of 1st Marine Division at that point.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So back to your civilian life as a CEO, can you recall anything where you said, wow, nothing prepared me for this decision or this moment as a civilian? Was there anything that you found yourself unprepared for? I'm asking this question because I want people to hear the answer that are transitioning out and going to be civilians, because I think there tends to be this feeling that, okay, I've got 30 years of experience in the Marine Corps. I really can't be surprised by anything. I've seen it all. And I don't know if that's true.
Yeah. The civilian world's different. And the reason it's different is because they're not Marines.
Right.
I'm the only Marine on staff at the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. A lot of our employees are related to Marines. Their father's a Marine. They're married to a Marine. They're, whatever. They have Marines in the family. But I'm the only Marine. So when you're dealing with civilians, you got to remember they don't have the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor tattooed on their heart like we do. They didn't come through the same forge and have the same ethos and have the same understanding. It's different.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we have great employees at the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. And they're very small number of folks, but they're passionate about the mission and the museum and taking care of Marines. And they've all become kind of quote unquote honorary Marines because they know as much as anybody what the Marine Corps stands for. So I'm really lucky. And it has made transition for me from a Marine to the civilian side much easier, which is why I say I have the best job in the world. Because again, after living my entire life in the Marine Corps from birth until I retired, to be able to still be with the Marine Corps now makes it easier for me. So I'm not out there in the corporate world trying to deal with the bottom line. I get to support the preservation of our Marine Corps story, which is very much in line with being a Marine. So I guess I don't have a good answer for what's different about civilians other than they're not Marines.
Yeah. But you do manage business functions.
Sure.
I mean, you do manage the bottom line there.
Yep.
Right? You got
We do.
revenue
That's
and
right. It's a
expenses.
business and you got to stay in the black. And so there's decisions that have to be made about that kind of thing. Those I don't find hard. I do have to rely on experts. I have a controller that understands accounting and knows how to do the books and that kind of thing. I have people that understand fundraising and how to do that and how to take care of that part of the business. So again, you're counting on experts just like you did in the Marine Corps to do their job. And it takes that teamwork and motivation still. And again, we're a team. Everybody has to pull their own weight on the team to make it work.
Right. I want to reverse that question now as we wrap up here and say, what have you learned in your civilian time that if you were looking back on your career, division commander, battalion commander, let's call it, what have you learned now that you said, if you could go back and do it over again, would you say, wow, I learned this, and if I was a battalion commander again, I would apply it in this way?
The first thing that comes to mind is I'm guilty sometimes of thinking that my subordinates have had the same experience that I have had. In other words, I guess I project what I know on them instead of understanding that, oh, you've never done that before. You've never been in that experience. So you have to understand that your subordinates haven't had the same experience that you have and don't know. So you need to tell them, I guess is what it is. You need to explain more what they should be understanding. I've seen that more on the civilian side than I did in the Marine Corps when I was on the Marine Corps, because I kind of knew where they were at that point in their career as a Marine. In other words, I knew I was a captain. I know where they are. So it's easy for me to understand that. Harder for me to put myself in the place of a civilian because I don't know where they're coming from on the civilian side.
One final question here as we wrap up then. Curious if you can talk about some of your time and your relationships that you had when you were in command with your senior enlisted advisors.
Oh, I had the best. Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Even as a battalion commander, my sergeant major was Kim Davis, who went on to be a sergeant major down at Mar 4 Res, and he was terrific. But at the division, I had Sergeant Major Zickafoos, amazing sergeant major, and then at Training and Education Command after division, Sergeant Major Justin LaHue, who, again, terrific. Both these guys, war heroes, related to Marines instantly, super supportive of me, but also, hey, sir, don't do that. That's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
No concern at all. I mean, we were close, and it wasn't like you have to come in and close the door. It was just, I used to call it my posse. So whenever I would go anywhere as a commanding general, I'd have myself, my sergeant major, my command master chief, and the four of us went everywhere. So whether that was, seeing Marines in the division or traveling around at TCOM, that was our team. And we could all speak from the same script all the time because we were together. So I learned so much from having great sergeants major as a commanding general. I was blessed. Those guys are all doing great, by the way, still. And I still have contact with them as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing those stories. Okay, so I'll wrap up with this thing. What is the coolest thing that the Marine Corps Museum has in storage that people don't see? Because you told me at some point that like 80% of the stuff isn't even in the museum, right?
Yeah, that's right. Some of the stuff that was in storage is now going to be in the new display downstairs.
Okay, sure.
One of those things is
the
that
M19 or 8 howitzer. Thank you very much.
No, not that one, but that's on there. Yeah. There's one piece that's going to come out soon. It's an easy answer. There's a Cobra.
Okay.
That was painted with the skyline of New York City on its camouflage pattern. So it's gray pattern, but it's got the skyline with the World Trade Center on it.
Oh, wow.
They painted that camouflage pattern on it after 9/11 and sent that Cobra to Afghanistan. And so it flew in Afghanistan with that skyline on it. And every Cobra pilot wanted to fly it. It's in the warehouse.
Really?
And we're going to hang it in the museum here.
Like from the main part along with the...
In between the Corsair and the UH-34 helicopter. It's going to be out there in the main gallery. So we're going to hang that Cobra maybe later this year.
Okay.
Maybe early next year. It's going up soon.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. Plus, it's the only aircraft in that main gallery that's newer than 2000. I mean, this century.
Yeah.
Because the Harrier's the last new aircraft that's in there, and that's an old Harrier that's hanging in there. That's a cool piece of gear that's there.
That's really awesome. That's cool. It's just, it must be exciting. Yeah. And how is all of the stuff going at the University of South Carolina with the digitization of the film? Is that all kind of still going on, or?
It's pretty much wrapped up now. So we had for the longest time had South Carolina digitizing the film that the history division has held to turn it in so we have that. I think that grant, if you will, is wrapped up and we're done with that work right now.
Okay.
We still support history division in a lot of ways with the oral histories and trying to get that stuff translated into so that it can be searchable. In other words, you want to be able to translate it and then have it searchable digitally. Yeah, there's one thing, Dave, if I could wrap up with too.
Please.
When I think back on my time in the Marine Corps, what sticks out is this connection of people, and it goes to the business that this is a people business. And so you never know when you're going to run into these people again. So one of my last assignments in the Marine Corps on active duty was when I was in Korea for 2 years as the MAR-4K CG and then also the J5 for U.S. Forces Korea. And so when we were trying to make sure we weren't going to war with North Korea early in the Trump administration, and we were doing fire and fury and my button's bigger than your button, and there was threat of going to war with North Korea. This is 2017. And so they embarked on a series of efforts to prevent that from happening. And the people I was working with as the J5 on the Joint Command in Korea, where the J5 at Indo-PACOM was a Marine, Keen Malavet. The person on the J5 Joint Staff was a Marine, Major General Tracy King. The DASD for Northeast Asia for OSD was General Bobby Shea. Marine.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who we briefed as well, was Joe Dunford. The director of the Joint Staff was Frank McKenzie. The Secretary of Defense was General Mattis.
Wow.
So all these people I had known from my time in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm communicating what we as the combatant command are thinking with Indo-PACOM, J5, OSD, Chairman's office, SecDev's office, it was people who, maybe more important than I knew them, they knew me. And so it made things work. This is the beauty of the Marine Corps, is that over time, these relationships with people continue, and it makes everything work, having those relationships with people.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, that's really what makes our service so special. Nothing against the other services. We're small, so we have that kind of culture and that people thing. And yeah, that's a great thing to wrap up with, sir, because you're right. And people ask all the time, I'm not sure what transferable skills I really learned in the Marine Corps. Look, I'm going to tell everybody that served in the Marine Corps this. You have a massive skill in networking.
Well, it's trust. It's the trust and relationships that we build together. That's what carries through, is that trust and relationships. And whether you call it networking, if you will, that's right.
Yeah. We're all 1 degree separated away from somebody else. And geez, all you have to do is walk up and say, geez, I was a Marine too. And you can end up in a conversation for an hour and walk away with a brand new friend that you never had before. And so it's all about the people. So
yeah.
As we wrap up here, sir, what's the best thing you've learned?
So I think the thing that I learned at some point early on in the career is that it's all about treating people the right way. That's the essence of leadership. And the quote that I like to go back to on that is, you treat every Marine as if they're the one who will save your life.
Right.
And so whether you're disciplining them at NJP or praising them or working with them, you treat them as if they're the one that's going to save your life. And it's that respect and care for those Marines that is the essence of leadership. That's probably the biggest thing that I think leaders need to attend to.
That's great advice. I see that actually playing itself out. If I look back on how people were treated 30 years ago and now, the Marine Corps has made a lot of progress with our culture and everything else. And I'm proud to still be affiliated with it. And I know you are too.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate